Hello. So happy to have you here, especially with my fine guests today, Beverly Glazer and Lance A. Slatton. So happy to have us all back together. Every time we get together, it seems like a very worthwhile conversation where not only do we learn a lot, but we help other people learn what we have learned. And with that said, the word of the day is stress. Chat's wide open. We depend on chat to make us relevant and direct our conversation to create some valuable takeaways. With that, I'll swing it right over to Beverly, and Beverly can catch us up and give us her first thoughts on stress. Beverly, please.
Well, always gets a bad rap, but it's not necessarily a bad rap. We need stress. We need some sort of stress. Too much stress, and we're over the top. And yes, that's what always gets a bad rap. But we're going to be talking about stress today. When people come to me, they're always under stress. Same with you, Lance, as well. And what it is there's something out of my control. And can you help me figure it out? And then it's really very simple, actually. And it's simple for everybody as well, because all you have to do is take a look at what's going on in your life, and boom, okay? It's not rocket science. We know when we're over the top. And for those who don't know who I am or what I do, my name is Beverly Glazer, and I help wonderful, powerful people to navigate the stress. I'm saying it again, stress in your personal, professional, and in your family life. You can, it's all one. We're living in our head, really, and we follow different roads and different paths, and those paths and roads conflict with each other. So we're going to be talking about that, how to relieve those stressors in your life. And sometimes, the stressors are there and we can't just get rid of them, so we have to learn how to deal with them. And so, Lance, I'm going to pass it on to you because it's always a valuable conversation. And yes, please, your turn.
Oh,
Share what you do.
thank you, Beverly, and thank you, Don. Uh, I was given an analogy back in high school, and I know a lot of you will probably be familiar with it. And it really is a great analogy for stress. If you don't identify it, you're going to get in trouble. And it's a lot like the boiling frog analogy, where, if you take a frog and you throw it in a pot of boiling water, that frog's jumping out immediately. But if you put the frog in while it's lukewarm and you slowly turn the heat up to come to a boil, the frog doesn't know any different and it won't jump out. And that's a lot like with family caregivers and us as people. We're in the mix day in and day out, and we might not realize the water's boiling because we've been in it and it's slowly increasing and increasing. And then you start having some, negative effects of that stress, whether it's, emotional, mental, physical, and then you go to bad habits, eating junk food because it's quick and easy, and not exercising because you're mentally tired but not necessarily physically tired. So identifying the stressors in your life is crucial, and identifying your limits is also just as crucial so that you don't end up in that pot of boiling water.
Exactly.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and to that point, stress is an everyday thing that you deal with in different areas of your life. And it could be just being in traffic will be stressful. So situations outside of your control will impact your stress level. I guess the keys are, how do you identify when you're under stress and how do you adjust to that so stress doesn't overwhelm you or impact your performance, or more importantly, your attitude, which will then project further out there, which will create even more stress. So I think learning to identify, learning to deal, and learning to make adjustments that won't continue to infuse stress into your life. And with that, we've got Harvey Tuck with us today. Harvey's just a wonderful guy. He's been with us for over a year plus. Started out like everybody in the audience decided to come on a show. Within 4 months, had the franchise show,
Yeah.
which is #1 on LinkedIn. Then created the franchise brand show, and actually Harvey follows this show with the franchise show. If you want to see it, just go to Harvey's profile, maybe connect while you're there, but also uh, go to his post or events and you can plug in there. It used to be in the background of people's profiles that you could join. Now you have to actually go to the post section or events or publish the link in advance, which I do. So thank you so much, Harvey. Also comes back with great to be here with my friends. And Lance, what are your trophies for? They look like Oscars. Well, that's a good question to answer. And before we get that answer, Carrie says the dad's son comes in and says, Dad, you know why you can't play a card game in the jungle? The dad says, why? Because all of the cheetahs. Well, that's a good way of reducing stress, is having a good sense of humor and thinking of positive things that will kind of get you through it. So, Beverly, your thoughts, and then Lance can come back and answer that trophy question.
Yeah, I'm going right back to how we deal with stress. Very often, as you said, Lance, you have to set boundaries, but life kicks in, and we respond to life. And we always keep on responding and responding. And sometimes we don't really read our stressors. We only read it when there is, like you said, negative habits, negative behaviors, behaviors where all of a sudden I'm eating too much, I'm gaining a lot of weight. And then what happens is you don't usually focus and say, if this is the stress I'm under. No, you just blame yourself and you say, I don't know why I'm eating. I'm just eating too much. I'm gaining weight. And you're going to start going on a diet, which, by the way, may add even more stress because you may not be able to keep that diet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we keep on piling on more and more stressors. And then when we say to each other, hey, how are you doing? The first thing you're going to say is, I'm fine. Okay. And so this really is the point. Those triggers, like eating too much, like drinking too much, like all that kind of stuff, that's where you have to kick back. And that's where you have to say, what's going on here? Why am I doing this? Usually, we blame ourselves for doing it. We feel that we have to be so capable, and it's hard to ask for help. And I know when people come to me, and same with you, I'm sure, Lance. And I have to tell people, and I say it all the time, very often when you're under real crisis, that you've just made the first step. And congratulations. Before you've reached out, it is so hard to say, I need help here.
Yeah.
And what happens usually is before you reach that crisis mode where you do reach out, you've paid a price for it. And it could be physically, your back, your sides. When you're talking about caregiving, my goodness, you may have lost a lot of friends in the process. Your life can literally be falling apart. This is the same in the workplace too. If your superiors keep giving you more and more work and you keep on working and I'm fearful I'm going to lose my job, whatever it is, you may get headaches, you may not be able to sleep, you may go to the doctor, etc., etc. And then you have to take a stress break. And then it's the same thing. What's going on? If I take a break, my superiors will think I'm a wuss. Am I going to get my job back? So all these things play in our minds and cause us stress. And so it's one thing to say, oh, let's just go off to the beach and take all the stress out of your life. What goes on is not at the beach. You can still get a heart attack on the beach. What's going on is going on in your head. So it's to understand when you're under pressure, to ask, to speak to people who know you how to get you out of those pressures, to speak to friends, to communicate. Because very often we just go into our shells and feel I'm just not strong enough. My mother did it. Everybody else can do it. I am just weak. And then this plays on us. Nobody is weak. As a matter of fact, you're strong to reach out, and you can do a better job when you're reaching out and getting the help you need, because then you will be a stronger person and be able to deal with everything that you want to deal with. So, by all means, stress can help you. We're all under stress when we get on to Restream, by the way. This is a good thing because then we're on. Okay. However, too much of all this, we kind of lose it. So, what you have to do, to your point, Lance, is you have to know when you're under stress, but often those triggers are the reminders. And so, know your triggers. When you're eating all that food and you don't really want to do it in your head, but in your body, you say, I'm starving, I must have it, it's delicious. That connection means I'm under stress. So, just read yourself, and then you'll start to say, hey, what's going on here? So,
Right.
Lance, put those trophies.
Yeah. So let me see how. Yeah. So those are
Oh, wow.
trophies for our show, All Home Care Matters. The gold looking Oscar, it actually is like an Oscar. It's very heavy. It's about 6 pounds. It doesn't look like it,
Whew.
but it is. That was for a social campaign for healthcare and wellness that we did on the ethics of dementia and social media. The other one is for on a topic we did on elder abuse. And then the big silver one with the YouTube play button, that was for our YouTube channel surpassing 100,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. I have to jump in. And can I jump in here too?
Please.
The book. I'll give you an Oscar for that.
I need you need to be on every interview I do, Beverly, so you can always whip that book out.
And this relieves stress.
It does.
Okay. The more knowledge you have, the less stress you have. Okay. You can get to understand, and it Lance's situation. I mean, all our situations when you're a caregiver and you have to take care of people that you need help with, you're under stress. And what to do, where to go. You may be under financial stress as well as emotional stress. There's so many difficulties. And just to tell you, I think this little book, and we should all, by the way, have little books because nobody reads. So it's a little book, people. It's easy to read, it's easy to navigate, and you can literally, and Lance isn't paying me. This is not an infomercial. It's really a good thing to be able to have the knowledge. And like everything else, too much is no good also. So you also understand that you have to know where to stop, because then can also be searching the internet. Everybody does, finding all kinds of reasons why you shouldn't, why you should, etc., etc. And the bottom line is you have to reach out, qualify, and speak to people. Speak, because in your heart of hearts, you know who and what you can relate to. And in Lance's situation, when you are bringing a parent or bringing a loved one to a residence or to any type of home care, you have to trust. But in your heart of hearts, you know. So it's not only knowledge, it has to do really with your feeling. Where do you feel comfortable? And that's with any professional, by the way. So
Yeah.
reach out and talk and ask and question and continue to question. So Dawn, I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh, no, you did great. You did better than I was going to do. Now I'll do even better because of what you did. So I believe we hit on a couple major points, and those are balance. Stress can be a motivating factor. It could be an alerting factor that keeps you on your toes, maybe makes you run a little faster than you might have. And the game truly is between you and yourself, right? It's your mind and how you manage or support your attitude, how you accept things for being realistic, and you don't fight what is not going to change, especially the past when it keeps coming back and haunting you into the future. And, growth, evolution is so key to everybody. Is what used to work and you used to get away with it. At a certain point, you can't do it or don't want to do it anymore. And have you really worked towards a replacement? How do you optimize your situation? And how do you accept your situation? Because too many people are fighting against themselves and becoming their worst enemy instead of their best friend. They say ignorance is bliss to a point. Knowledge is wonderful to a point. How many people know so much and do so little? And then all of a sudden you've got conflicting knowledge points, and it's conditional and it's relative to the situation. Sometimes you need to do this, sometimes you need to do that. How do you shift gears? And how do you give yourself credit for avoiding stress and then dealing with stress when you can't avoid it? So the key is, how do you minimize the bad? How do you maximize the good? And then get to the point of saying, this isn't stressful, this is typical. It's not stressful when it happens every day. It's what you're needing to work with. Now, you can avoid it or you can move away from it. So you have the choice how long you stay within it. So there is control. We want to always mention Kelly. Kelly's been with me every Thursday since January 17th of last year. She's working with Wheelchairs for Warriors, and she's the outreach director. Since being on the show, her visibility has gained so much attention and respect, because that's another thing I think Beverly and Lance alluded to it, is everybody has their own voice. And once it's heard, it has value. And some people step into the shadows and become marginalized and just are victimized by their inability to reach out, like Beverly said, for help, or to read a book like Lance's and get a shared opinion, because, you can't have a poll of one. You got to have a little bit of a consensus. And after 4 or 5 different opinions, you start to change your opinion, because you just think, hey, the worst thing is being alone, thinking you're beyond help, and all of a sudden you can start to spiral. Harvey comes back with a meaty comment. Life leaves its marks, good and bad. Wrinkles around eyes normally tell a story of smiling, laughing, and joking. A furrowed brow may suggest worry, but all our marks are indicators of a life lived. I'm proud of the chinks in my armor. Window to the soul. And then Harvey comes back, enjoys what Lance says. Fantastic, Lance. Love
Thank
that
you.
story. Well deserved. And Kelly comes back with awe. Love y'all so much. Great. And, love is the answer in most cases, and there's just not enough of it. And people don't appreciate how important it is to be a go-giver, to really help other people get an improved attitude, stress less. Another thing is, when you're really busy or when you're involved in something bigger than yourself, your situation doesn't seem as significant. It's really idle time, idle thought, and the repetition, that loop that goes through your head that tells you you're not good enough or whatever it is. So with that, let me throw it right back to Lance with all the motivation and encouragement he's gotten since he last talked. Love to hear what it does.
Say that again, Don. I couldn't hear the audio.
Okay, I said, because of everybody's encouragement of you and your awards, how do you now evolve into sharing what is made you less stressful? And I know you deal with stress all the time in your
Oh
occupation.
yeah. It's part of my daily diet. We you just take it in chunks. Nobody's going to eat an elephant at one sitting. You eat an elephant bite by bite, piece by piece. And I think everybody interprets stress differently too. As Beverly was talking, I think of, like, I coach a soccer team at our school, and you always have the 3 or 4 kids. It's not necessarily stress, but I equate it to stress where, "Oh, I don't wanna run the 4 laps or the 5 laps. I can't do it. I can't do it." They've already determined without even attempting that they can't do it. And I think sometimes we look at stress in a negative way, in the sense that we already stressed ourselves out before finding out if it would stress us out. You know what I mean? They've already gone in with that preconceived notion. And I tell them, do 1 lap, see how you feel. You know, if, equating that to stress, if you're stressed at work, you know what? Work for a few minutes, then kind of take a break and take a deep breath and just kind of refocus yourself. And then just, as you build up that endurance or that tolerance to whatever it is that's stressing you out, try try to see where your limits are. Find out where your limits are. Find out what is a safe space for you to operate within without going outside of it. And I mean that in the sense of, like, family, caregiving. Sometimes a daughter or a son or even a spouse, they feel like they have to do 24/7. They can't give up any of that control because I feel like they're gonna feel guilty. But that guilt is just a figment of their imagination. They're not being guilty, like Beverly said. You're stronger for seeking help than you are for rejecting help, right? You have to identify, I can't do this all on my own. It's not possible for anyone to provide care for an individual around the clock every day of the week, because your health's going to get neglected, your diet's going to become neglected, your commitments and responsibilities are going to go out the window, and you're going to stress yourself out to the point of maybe needing hospitalization.
Mhm.
So find out where your limits are, find out what your boundaries are. And sometimes you have to set those boundaries for others so that they don't cross them on you. You know, if you had somebody that's going to help take care of your spouse and they said, I'll be there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you're counting on them and they keep saying, well, I can't do it. And they think it's okay because you're the spouse and of course you're going to do it anyways. Set the boundaries. Look, I'm counting on you for help. I can't put myself through that. You're stressing me out because now I have, a dozen phone calls I need to make because I had all these commitments lined up for the day you're supposed to help me. Finding that sweet spot, if you will, for where your boundary starts and where it ends will really help you in the long run, really putting the boundaries in place.
Great, great, great advice. Beverly?
Yep. Well, there's quite a few things that you said in here that I'd love to mention. The first one is really what you said about your own thinking. And that little kid who doesn't want to run, I'm going back to that, right? Um, we have all these fears in our heads, and those fears cause stress. As you were saying, Dawn, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not enough. And when you want to be as good as everyone else or as good as the people in your head, okay, it depends on who you're competing with. Stop competing, okay? When you're a perfectionist or when you're trying to prove that you're better, I go to the gym every day, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a super mom, all that stuff. That adds additional stress. And what you also have to see is you are who you are. You can only handle so much. And as Lance said, set boundaries with your limitations. And if people cross those boundaries, they have to know, okay, that no, this is not acceptable. You have to start saying, yes, but, and I hear this all the time, yes, but they, and then you give an excuse for other people's behavior. If you give that excuse, people get accustomed to the fact that they can make excuses. But if they know it's an obligation and they know that they have to make a commitment, then it's going to not only relieve your stress, you will have a better relationship with that person because you can count on that person. So that person may be another caregiver that's there to help you. It can be a colleague, it can be a superior. It doesn't matter. If you have too much work to do, you don't have to say, oh, it's too much. No, no, no. That's definitely not professional. What you can do is really say, well, what would you like me to start with first? What is the priority? Set your boundaries. Don't keep on thinking, oh, they just gave me more work. Ah, I have so much to do, etc., etc. Of course you do. But the work will not stop. And if that person doesn't know you're being overloaded, perhaps they don't realize it. So you have to be able to have the confidence, and that's huge, to have the confidence that you have the value that other people will respect. And when I'm talking here, you could be on top of the food chain. It's exactly the same thing. Okay. Because the pressures at the top are, I would say, I was going to say more, but just as strong, even if you have a team of people that are going to be helping you and supporting you, if not more than the pressures on the bottom, because you're supporting the whole enchilada. So this is what we're talking about. It's all up here. All right. Oh, I can't handle it. And you may not be saying it to anybody, but you're saying it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that will build the stress on your body, on your heart in particular, on the way you react to other people, your overreactions, and headaches and back pains, etc., etc. And we run to a doctor and we get a pill, but it's not going to correct what really are the underlying factors. And that is really chipping, and a whole lot of things, and getting down to the why. Why are you doing this in the first place? Right? And when you get right back down to the why, you will relieve an awful lot of stress because you can be screaming and yelling for all kinds of things because you're under so much stress. But why are you doing it? Is it because that person is incompetent? Or maybe you have given so much pressure to that person that they are becoming incompetent and now they do need a stress break, or maybe they do quit. So whatever is going on, it starts with you and it starts with thinking. And boy, did I go from that little kid to being a president of a company, okay? Because we're all that little kid, all of us. And so how we think determines how we behave. So we have to take that check among ourselves because nobody but you knows how you think. And so what you have to do is when you're under stress, and notice it by the triggers that you have, notice it by the reactions you have with other people, notice all of the above. And then you don't have to make excuses for it, but you do have to see what triggered all that. Why? And the answer is all within you, and certainly get help, but don't overdo it. You know, I when I had my office and people came and they gave me these diagnoses of what they were, it's like, who told you? Oh, no, no, no. It says it, it says it online. Really? Oh, why? I don't think so. Okay. And that's the same, Lance, I'm sure so many people coming in, giving you advice, right? And it's wonderful to understand what's going on the other side, but you know what's going on inside. You know what's going with the caregivers. Okay. And that's the thing. You have to let go some of the control.
Yeah.
And that would be in business, that would be in the family, that would be everywhere you go. Okay. Even if you think you're the one that can do it best, is it best for you? Maybe not.
Right.
Okay. So we have to start understanding all these dynamics. It's all up here in the head. Okay. So stress starts here. And then you have to be able to understand and do what it takes. Go for a run, talk to people, laughter. We talked about that. That relieves so much stress. And understand that you are not alone. And so, yes, I think it's your turn, Dawn. Oh, no, or is it Lance? I don't know.
Okay.
I lost it.
I'll be a little briefer just in case it was Lance. Um, and I think what you touch on is so important because the element of hope is valuable. What is your future looking like? What is there cavalry on the way? Are you dealing with a short-term situation? Is it a timing
Mhm.
situation? Well, those are temporary and they can be just as stressful, but you can see beyond them to say, okay, at this point, it will get better, or I will get help. And again, there's conflicting stresses. You might have a little bit of stress on finance, a little bit of stress on relationship, but collectively, you're getting stress from a lot of areas, and you
Mhm.
really don't know what you're into until you're out of it. And then
Yeah.
you can look back. At the same time, I know from reading and learning that some of your most stressful situations are some of your best lessons that you take with you when it's over with because you survived, you got through it, and nobody gets through everything without a little bit of pain. But again, like the elephant scenario, you can do little things. And like Beverly says, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's taking a walk, maybe it's going to church, whatever it is that can relieve that, distract you even, and laughter can distract you. You can't cry and laugh at the same time unless you're laughing so hard that you don't have a choice but to have some tears rolling down. But you have opportunities. And some people are martyrs. Some people are more concerned with how they look than how they feel, and if I don't do this, people will think this. And if I'm not the best son in the world, people are going to wonder. Well, no one's going to wonder when you end up, like Lance says, in a hospital bed.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
who's taking care of the person you were taking care of? And now who's going to take care of you? So there's a point you got to hit the escape hatch and say, whatever it takes, I've got to be strong and I've got to be happy. Life is short, right? To be in a life that's just overwhelming and stressful is no fun. And it also is no fun for the people around you because now they're thinking, oh, I'm worried about you. You're doing too much. Now that worry starts to circulate versus, hey, I did the best I can. That's all I can do. I was just listening to the book uh, Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie, and it just has one case history after another. Marion, Ohio, dealt with this, and this is what happened, and dealt with this. And it really does demonstrate that you can control and discipline certain things and draw those boundary lines to say, I can go here, but I can't go beyond that. And that's where I have to put the stake in the ground. Lance, love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean it's all pertinent, relevant information. I firmly believe something that might stress out Beverly may not stress me out, but it might, and vice versa. I think it's perspective. A lot of it's perspective. If things that you can control, try to control them. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna just stick with my area of specialty with, senior care and healthcare. If I'm the oldest son and my mother all of a sudden needs caregiving, but she
Right.
insists that it must be me and my wife that do it, I might not be in a position in my life where I can do it. I might be working full time. I have kids
Mhm.
in school, but she's going to put that demand on me, if you will. that I might not be able to say, well, no, mom, that's not possible. I might try to, bend myself in 30 different ways to make it work, where I'm stressing myself out by doing that. And where if you have a very maybe uncomfortable conversation with your loved one and say, look, I can't do this. And they might not have seen that side of it. They might just assume, you know what? You have all the time in the world and you'll help take care of me, because that's what everybody ideally would want to be able to do, I'm sure. But having an uncomfortable conversation, identifying your limit, right, is going to prevent you from maybe causing all kinds of other, effects from just trying to pacify and please whatever the demand is. When in reality, if you just have that maybe uncomfortable conversation from the beginning, it avoids everything else. I always like to equate it to vehicles because it's something we can all relate to. If my check engine light keeps coming on and I hear clunking, I would rather go deal with it at the dealership or at the mechanic now than say, "You know what? Well, hopefully it's nothing. It's just a clunking noise under my hood and the engine lights flashing at me. I'm gonna keep driving it." Well, then at some point the car is gonna break down, and then it's gonna cause you a lot more grief and a lot more stress than if you'd have just dealt with it then, rather than trying to push it aside. Don't wanna deal with something that might be uncomfortable in the car situation. It might be costly, but odds are it's gonna become more costly because you did push it aside rather than dealing with it when it first, came up. So stress is really, a lot of it is controllable if you know yourself, know what your limits are, know what you can do, what you can't do. And communication, I think, also helps to limit stress. We've all had situations when we were younger where, oh, I think that person doesn't like me. So you're stressing out about whether they like you or not. And the person, a year later, you have a conversation about, "Oh, you didn't like me." Well, what are you talking about? I don't even know what so we kinda get these things in our head, and we make these little things sometimes much bigger than what they are, and they might not even be anything at all. It's just stepping away from ourselves and trying to look at an unbiased eye and say, "Okay, what is the cause and effect? Do I tell my mom I can't realistically meet her care needs and be there the way she needs right now? Or do I just try to go through every hoop and obstacle to try to meet that need, and I'm still gonna fall short, and it's gonna cause a lot of other issues in my life, which is gonna raise the stress even greater." It's just stepping aside and trying to look at it from a very neutral point of view and putting down what you can do and what you can't do.
Great points, Beverly.
Yeah, you touched on a point that's so important, Lance, and that is guilt. Okay, guilt, particularly in caregiving.
Mhm.
When you're caring for an elderly person or caring for anyone, as a matter of fact, um, there's always a feeling that you have an obligation to do so much. And sometimes you even resent that person. I'm going even deeper. Okay.
Very true.
And yeah, and your personality comes out in your caregiving. And that then you feel even more guilty because you don't want to be that person. You really want to show love and caring, but you're under stress because that person has all these stories in your head. And one way to relieve the stress of that is don't go back in the past and think of those stories.
Yeah.
Okay. We make up those stories. Those stories are not true. They're all in our heads. And what we've created is that hate, that resentment, that horrible tyrant, etc., etc. And so just see the situation the way it is, deal with the situation the way it is, and it will also relieve your stress big time. If you go back into past stories, really no good for you. And another thing, going into caregiving as well, there are stories that we have about our siblings. And you, if you are the major caregiver and they are directing from different parts and don't really get it, and they play, the eldest son, the youngest son, the baby, whatever, you don't really know all the family dynamics that go along with this. And then you have the resentment for what you're doing. All this stuff, okay, all this baggage will come out. And you, of course, Lance, see it all, okay? And sometimes you don't see really the backstory. And what I do is I see the backstory and then able to relieve the stress, to manipulate, to, the strategy to relieve the stress for all. Okay. But the point that I'm making really is it's a mindset. And I'm thinking right now, all this family dynamic stuff, which causes us stress, holidays. Oh, we're all supposed to have this wonderful holiday. Or we're all supposed to meet mom for a family Christmas and she's in the home. And then what we understand in that residence is all that family dynamics comes back. And that stuff has got to go. And I'm thinking right now of a client who had to do it's a family, no question, it's a family business. And it's a huge family business. And they have meetings, family meetings, because there's trusts and all this. So it's the business side as well as the family side. And my client she was really nervous about what's going to go on here because we're a family, we're a business, we are whatever. And the dynamics between, I know, my first question was, what do you expect? And it sounded like an absolute horror, which should have been a real delight. Everybody's coming, they're coming from all across, in this case, Canada. They're all coming all across, some with children. They haven't eaten, but this sister is this and that one doesn't eat that and all that stuff and all the stuff that has to go, okay? And so my question to her really was, what if you just plain accepted that that's the way they are? And not be angry with who they are and how they act. And what if you say, next year when we meet again, those that do not have to come but can be on Zoom, that is going to cut all this drama of, I came and I missed the flight and blah, blah, blah. This is an all expense paid wonderful weekend in a resort. And if you don't have to come, you're part of this company. So meet us on Zoom for our meetings and don't participate in any of this. What if you accept? So the same with family caregiving, the same with everything we do. Don't try to change it. Accept it. When you accept what's really going on, you'll deal with the now. And when you're dealing with that, your stressors will go down. You may not like it, by the way, but what you're doing is not fighting it because that's just the way it is. Period. Case closed. And so if you're upset that your mom, I'm going to say it, is dying, okay, and you don't want to let her go and you're angry because of all the stuff that's going on within you, understand the stuff is within you. But once you've accepted, or once she has accepted it, it's so much better for all of us. So we put ourselves in this tremendous stress. I shouldn't say for no reason, but it's really from the stories that we create and the stories from the past and all this scrambled kind of stuff. And by the way, when I asked her, how did that family meeting go? She says, Beverly, we had such a good time. She said, I just closed all the issues. They can come if they want. They can go on this sailing adventure, do whatever they like. And she says, and I accepted it all. And we had a fabulous time, never better. That happens when you just accept. That person's going to come in. He's going to be the loudmouth. He's going to overrun the place. Just accept it, put a stop to it, handle it. So create your own stories. Believe me, change the old model and just accept what is.
Well, what I'm starting to hear, and there's a common thread, is don't keep things totally inside yourself. You can be a facilitator, but you don't have to be the be all and end all. And everything you do in a stressful situation has collateral benefit or challenge to it. Because you're right, under a lot of stress, you may end up talking to someone in a way that you don't really normally talk, but it's stress really influencing you. That creates dissonance going forward. And by sharing and being transparent to say, let me just tell you honestly what I'm dealing with, what I'm feeling, what I'm going through. Why not offer context to someone who's not familiar or not in the situation as directly as you? And also know, because I was prided myself on being on a family that always had conflicts between people, but somehow I avoided them because I understood when I was going to visit somebody for a few days, I probably wouldn't see them for another year. So those few days would be what people kept until my next visit. And I knew some people were just going to do the same thing they always do, try to engage me in situations. And typically I would know how I would like to react, but I decided it's not worth it. Like, it's just a point. It's just a view. You win. I accept it. I'm okay with it because then you can move beyond it. Some people are looking to bring people into conflict because they're conflicted. Some
Right.
people only know how to go forward and fight all the way instead of being neutral or reverse themselves. And it's making the best of what is. You're dealing with a challenging situation to begin with. In most cases, you didn't have anything to do with it, but now you're involved in it. And it's doing the best you can with what you got and knowing that you're not capable. I had situations in my family where a nephew had a very serious case of MS and it was aggressive, and his parents just wouldn't accept it. They wouldn't allow him to go with and join other people. They dedicated their life to 24/7 care, and they both ended up sick and ended up in an early death even. And when you brought it up, it was like, well, it's not your son. You don't know what it feels like. You can't really say anything. And at a certain point, you say you're right, but is this really what's best for the person, or is it best for your identity or ego or vanity? Is sometimes you just, like Lance said, I'm not able. And sometimes talking with that person who wants you to do it doesn't quite fully understand what you're dealing with, too.
Right.
And until you say, hey, Ma, I'd love to do it. If that's all I had to do and I had the time, I do it. But I've got other relationships. I've got obligations to my wife, to my kids, to my job, to everything else. And if there is that sense of love, someone would say, well, it's not worth sacrificing that for me at this point. Let's find an alternative. Or I'll be more understanding when you can't make it all the time. And there is some middle ground. It isn't all or nothing or absolute, and I think that's so important is do the best you can and don't feel guilty about whatever happens because you weren't in full control anyways. And you're probably doing more than a lot of other people would have done with the load you have. So I
Mm.
think give yourself more credit, and there will be good days. There will be days when your interaction with that person is real positive. I mean, people go in and out of moods and attitudes, and just look at the bigger picture and also understand that this won't last forever. All things will pass. Even though there was a time when me and my wife were taking care of my mother for the last 2 years, that a thought came of, what if I go before she does because of my son? Wouldn't that be kind of ironic? So yeah, having a sense of humor and doing the best you can, and not getting little things to always upset you, because I think it is a loop that goes in your head, and that could be more challenging than the situation because you get phobic after a while. You start creating all this unnecessary worry, but it's easy to say until you're in those situations. But that's where I think wonderful people like Beverly and Lance could be of service. You know, why not talk to people who are involved in it, who have experience in it? And that might give you that little extra edge to keep you going, because it's like, how do I get over this hump? And then we'll deal with the next hump. And I think trying to do too much too soon with too little can be a very frustrating situation. So, Lance, your turn.
Well, I think you had mentioned earlier the word dissonance. And a lot of times I know we're faced with families, sticking with my example of the mother wanting the son to help. The mother sometimes is wrapped up in her own cognitive dissonance where
Mhm.
she has these beliefs and realities that are not real reality. And it's hard sometimes for family members to get through to their loved one that this is the reality that I can't help. And I love your example, Don, where they said, "Well, I'll be more understanding when you can't help." But then you have the other side where you have that loved one who doesn't have any understanding unless it has a benefit to them because they have such a cognitive dissonance that they feel like they have to keep control. It's their child, that you should be there at beck and call. And one piece of advice that we often give families in our support groups is don't try to change the person. You rarely can ever change somebody, especially somebody who has lived a full life and has been that way for 60, 70, 80 plus years. I had one gentleman tell me in the support group because he was going through something just like what we're describing with his mother. And he said, my dad told me, because his parents were divorced. And he said, his dad told him, he said, son, if your mother was ever going to change, I would still be married with her. And, and that I'm like, that's a great way of kind of explaining the dynamic of, what this son was going through. You know, say what you need to say. Sometimes people will say, well, they won't talk. They'll just, ramble on or cut me off and my best solution is I said, don't send a text message, don't try to call them, write them a letter, hand it to them or mail it to them. I guarantee you they will read it. Guaranteed. Because they're very self-centered, self-absorbed. They need to know what's in that letter. They have to know, and you can at least, if nothing else, let them know your position and what you're able and capable of doing, whether they accept it or not. Now you've given them control to make a decision. They can either accept what you're saying or they cannot accept it, but you've done your part. That's nothing more can be asked of you. And, it's just unfortunate because in the, society we live in, families are busy. Most homes are two-income earning homes. Our parents are living much longer. Don, your mom came to live with you. You know, a lot of people are in what we call the sandwich generation, where they still have minor children living at home, going to school activities and sports. You have the parents who are still, of working age, have to work. But then you have your parents who are living longer, and the likelihood of you having to play that caregiver role in any capacity, no matter how little or how severe, is very likely to happen. So, start preparing now so that you can be best prepared when it happens. None of us grow up planning to become a caregiver, not like when we are having children. And it is a very stressful time for numerous reasons. Not only the stress of, the emotion, the mental, your parents not healthy, they might be dying or losing their abilities and having to face their, demise. But then also your children, you're having to take care of them and you have a job and, it's a highly, highly stressful time. And, statistics have shown, Don, that the family caregiver, the one caring for the elderly or the sickly person, the caregiver's health suffers greater than the person they're caring for because
Hmm.
of the neglect it causes on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Beverly?
Yes, I'm listening to all this. Well, there's so much, but one of the things that came to mind is just on my podcast. Well, first of all, stress. We're talking about stress, the negativity of stress. Stress is kind of a good thing in a way because once we reach a certain point in stress, something's got to change. And when we make that change, it doesn't matter whether it's a change uh, for just maybe I need more help, or maybe I have to take care of myself too, whatever it is, there is change that comes about. And the stress has pushed you to finally make that change. And in my podcast, where I'm talking to women who have keep on going and growing, it's always a stress that makes you change and deviate and go into another direction. And in the latest episode, this woman, who's today is in her 60s, became a caregiver. You'd be interested, Lance, when she was 17 years old.
Wow.
For her father. Okay. What happened was he had a stroke and he was being taken care of pretty well at home. And the parents, who didn't have a good relationship in the first place, the mother decided to have a divorce. This was it. And didn't realize that she would end up being the full-time caregiver, but she was. And so she was taking care of her dad, doing her life, went into business, went to college, did what she had to do. And they did have help at home, but she was the full-time caregiver. She gets married, and one of her children is autistic. So she ends up now taking care of her dad, taking care now, of course, of this child that needs care. And the story continues. Plus, now she's running a business with her husband. And as she's running this business, of course, over time, dad dies, but she still has her child and she has her husband. Now, what happened is her husband had a mental break. And because of it, well, he also was diagnosed with cancer and had a mental break. It went into this whole thing. Then here she is, the caregiver, steps up to the plate automatically. He eventually died as well. And she was, throughout this whole time, she was watching her friends. She was doing everything, still continuing to run this insurance business. And what she said to herself is, finally, I've been playing the victim and I'm not a victim anymore. And caregivers often are put into a role where they do feel they are a victim. And of course, for this person who was just a girl and she started caregiving, the stressors of each one just went into another. But we all have a choice. And the choice is whatever our role is. We do not have to be a victim. We do not have to be a victim of caregiving. We do not have to be a victim of the pressures that we have. We have to accept what's going on in our lives. And once we've accepted and changed it, then things change, and they'll always change for the better because you're going to make it so. So those are really pretty well my final my final remarks, because we're all responsible and it all starts within. And if we have too much stress in our lives, we're going to see it. We'll see it by our own behavior, and we can also change it by our own behavior as well.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And it brings me back to my mother's situation. And you have to create things that they have something to look forward to. Like every night, me and her had a routine. Uh, pills at 8, insulin at 9, oxygen at 10, and there was dessert every night. And it was a choice of desserts. And she'd always look forward and ask me, what's for dessert every night? And I'd tell her, and she would always say, if that's all there is, that's what I'll have. And, it was kind of cute. And then Claire, who was my granddaughter, who was born within a few days of my mother coming, every Wednesday was Claire Day. And she would always look forward to that Wednesday. So people still have a life. They want to live it. And you have to give them ways to do it that are as simple as a drumstick or having a visit, because every day isn't as long if you have something to look forward to. But most people in those situations look back and wish they could have been what they were, and they're not. And there's disappointment where here's what you can do and here's what you can enjoy. So Lance, I'll give you the last 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, thank you, Don. Beverly. It's always a pleasure to be here. I just like to tell family caregivers they're not alone, and take it day by day. Take it day by day. What might seem like a serious emergency and a crisis today, hindsight, you might look back and say, it wasn't that bad or it was silly. Start with the way you think and the way you look at things, because that plays a big role in how you respond to stress and how you manage stress.
Those are excellent points, and I want to thank Beverly and Lance today that we together we weave real gold as far as insights and advice, and hopefully we help even one person today get further along on their journey, and we've done our job. So I want to thank the audience. I want to thank Beverly, and Lance. I'm so many people. And thank you. Come back tomorrow. We've got Carl Dakin focused on fundraising. And then Thursday, we've got Kelly back. So thank you.